No matter how difficult it was, no matter how dangerous it was, the mountains do find a way of calling you back again and again.
Tell us one incident which has been a tough challenge despite all your preparations.
One of probably the most dangerous ones that stands out to me was an expedition to Mount Denali, which is the highest peak in North America. And we had gone as an unguided expedition. My dad has been my inspiration. I saw him climbing and I wanted to find out why he goes to the mountains. And I think if my dad was not into adventure, or if he thought, she's a girl, why make her do something that is so extreme and dangerous, I would never have ventured into this.
At your age, with all that you've done, what is your understanding of leadership? Hi, Kamya. Welcome to Inside the Mind of a Leader. This is the first one that I'm doing with a 17-year-old and calling you a leader, but just because I've just heard you and that gave me goosebumps, I know you are absolutely set for the position already.
Thank you.
What I would want to know is what's the dream? I mean, what made you, go on this journey and, go on 7 summits and, be successful there?
I think it never started out, there's no one distinct moment where the journey started. And it never started out as a record breaking attempt. It was just that I enjoyed being in the mountains, enjoyed being disconnected from the internet and any other responsibilities for those, 5-6 days when I was out on a trek with my mom or my dad, and just had fun being there the most. And we just started taking that forward. So I think the dream was just to be in the mountains because that experience just made me the happiest. And slowly it turned from just being happy to a passion where the mountains kept calling me and I just had to go back again and again.
Wonderful. So, let's talk about the mindset that's required to do what you're doing, right? What does your normal week look like, right? And what is it that keeps pushing you to do this? What is the mindset? Where does all that resilience, that strength, that passion comes from?
I think for an adventure sport like mountaineering, mental strength and resilience is equally as important as the physical preparations that we do.
Absolutely.
Because no matter how hard you train, on a tough expedition, you will reach a point where your body has completely been worn out. And at that point, it's your mental resilience that keeps you going. So I think for me, the mental strength comes from reading about the climb as much as I can. So for me, I usually try that before I set out on an expedition, I should have an idea of what my day-to-day schedule is going to look like on the mountain, what the route is going to be like, what are the landmarks I'm going to pass, what are the challenges I could face, what have other climbers done to face those challenges. So I think for me, when I know as much about the mountain as I possibly could, that reduces the uncertainty.
Yeah.
So that gives me a lot more confidence in my own skills going into the expedition. And of course, the physical training is equally as important. So we usually train by running long distance. So, every week, about 3 or 4 days, we're running anywhere between 8 to 10 kilometers. Or during COVID, we started climbing the stairs of our building. We live in a 20-floor building. So we found that climbing stairs was a very good method of training, which showed great results on the climb.
Yeah.
So we climb the floors about 10 times or 12 times every day. And we cycle, we go out on treks. Being in Mumbai, being close to the Sahyadris, I think we have that option of going out for treks. So that gives us a bit of an idea of walking in that kind of terrain. We carry our rucksacks that we usually have on the expedition.
Okay.
So that kind of simulates what we might face in the expedition to a certain extent and helps us prepare in that way.
I mean, despite all these preparations, there might be times when, something goes wrong, right? Maybe tell us one incident which has been a tough challenge despite all your preparations.
I think we've had those moments in pretty much every expedition. But one of probably the most dangerous ones that stands out to me was an expedition to Mount Denali, which is the highest peak in North America. And we had gone as an unguided expedition. So it was just 4 of us climbers, and we'd prepared well. It's a difficult climb, but we'd reached the summit. And on the way down, summer had set in early, so the glaciers in the the crevasses throughout the glacier and the ice field had opened up. And there were hundreds of crevasses between Camp 1, where we were, and the base camp from where we had to fly out of the mountain. We had no way of knowing how to get back to the base camp because the usual route marking flags had fallen down because the snow had melted.
Wow.
And later in the evening, when the winds would pick up, the snow had covered over them. So we had no way of knowing how the route was back to the base camp. And at that point, I think we hadn't accounted for summer to set in early, because according to the usual weather forecast, we were supposed to have a few more good days before the glacier started melting. So we were lost there. We had no way of going back. We called for rescue, but the national park told us that we can't conduct a rescue unless someone had fallen into a crevasse already. So we had no communication, no help whatsoever. And, we as much as called my mom and said, we're going to start climbing now, but if we don't call you by this time tomorrow, then something terrible has happened. So, we were ready to start probing every single step to see if there's a crevasse ahead of us or not.
Right.
And we started out on the climb. Thankfully, there were 2 other guided groups that were higher up on the mountain. And they had heard about the glacier melting, and one of them decided to terminate their climb. Another decided to skip a rest day, and they came down. And there were about 40 climbers. We all formed one single line. The guides took turns to probe the snow and see if the path is all right. And usually the walk back from Camp 1 to the base camp takes about 5 hours. That day, it took us 9 hours to get back to the airstrip.
Wow.
But we got there in one piece. So I think that is what I take away from it, is that in mountaineering, no matter how much you prepare, there's always factors that are out of your control. And you need to be calm when dealing with them, because of course you're going to be scared. Your life is most probably on the stake, but nothing is going to come out of panicking in that kind of a situation.
That's wonderful. What I would want to ask you here is, how do you bring yourself to the next climb then after experiencing something like this?
I think it's just an addiction, I would say, in a sort of a way. Because I remember when my first trek happened, we had an icebreaker with the rest of the team. And all the experienced trekkers used to say, the mountains call you back.
Right.
And as a 7-year-old, I found that hilarious, because I thought, how are the mountains going to call you back? But I think it is true. So no matter how difficult it was, no matter how dangerous it was, the mountains do find a way of calling you back again and again. And in fact, we have something, a cartoon called the Mountaineer Cycle. So you plan an expedition, you go out on the climb, you ask yourself, why am I putting myself through this? And you promise to never go on a mountain again. You summit and come down, and then you start planning your next expedition. So it's just a cycle and an addiction, but the mountains are my happy place. So I just keep finding ways to go back.
Wonderful. I hope you keep going back and having the best of experiences possible with the minimal amount of such challenges.
Absolutely.
So, you're a young achiever, right? You've, the Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, has mentioned you in his Mann Ki Baat, which a lot of young aspirants watch. So 2 questions for you here. 1, how do you manage to balance your studies with your expeditions and your training? And a message that you would like to give out to all young aspirants who have a dream that they want to fulfill?
I think the balance comes from the focus. And for me, it was very intrinsic, because I've been doing this right from when I started school. Maybe not as seriously, but I've been going out on treks and training regularly for my expeditions right from when I started school. So it was kind of just a habit that built in that way of, I need to manage my academics and my climbing. Both of those are equally as important to me. So I think when I had that priority set, that definitely gives you the need to also focus on your academics rather than just the mountaineering, or focus on the mountaineering as well as the academics. And I think a lot of it is about working in the small amounts of time that you get in between two big things. So, right from climbing Everest, where I was sitting at the base camp and studying for examinations, or when I was applying for colleges sitting in Antarctica. I think it's about making the best use of all the free time that you get put together. And also, it's about having a very good support system back home, at your school, at your college, wherever you are. And I think I'm really lucky to have had that, because I've had teachers who have taken extra efforts to help me out with my academics. I've had teachers who have agreed to sit with me on a video conference when I was transiting between two flights in Dallas airport and take an extra class for me. So I think that kind of support system and that kind of extra effort makes all the difference. And I think there's this common notion that student athletes don't focus on their academics, or they aren't good at studies just because they're into sports. And I think to me, that has always been a very wrong notion, because one, in my case, I feel that being involved in sports brings a lot of discipline into a person, and that shows up in everything else that they do. And two, when you keep propagating that kind of a thought, I think somewhere down the line, a lot of young people who get into sports also start believing that they don't need to give as much time to their academics. I think my only message to not just athletes, but I think young people who want to do something apart from their mainstream academics is just that you can very much have a balance. It is possible. And I think it's just about prioritizing what is really, really important to you. And then you will find time to do everything that you love.
Absolutely. There's a lesson in time management for everyone here. And, as you were talking, I was also thinking about the support system, your teachers, the guides who have supported you, people who helped you along your journey. But, let's talk about your pillars. Let's talk about, the wind beneath your wings, right? As a parent, when I also think of my children, when they want to take up some hobby, right, which might be a passion for them, and they might want to take it forward. As you grow older, something kind of holds you back, because you're like, okay, the studies need to come first. You have other responsibilities. You got to make the money, right? So let's talk about your parents. How have they supported you, and did they have these kind of thoughts when they were supporting you?
I think I'm very lucky that they've supported me in every possible way. My dad has been my inspiration. I saw him climbing and I wanted to find out why he goes to the mountains. And I asked my mom that question and she said, I'll take you to the mountains. Let's go see what's there. Why does dad keep going back again and again? And I think if my dad was not into adventure, or if he thought, she's a girl, why make her do something that is so extreme and dangerous, I would never have ventured into this. If my mom had said, you can go figure out on your own, I might have started out. Maybe I would have gone on 2 or 3 treks. But if not for her partnering with me and, going on the initial few treks with me, I might not have had this passion last for this long. So I think that support definitely makes a huge difference right from the initial stage. And of course, when it is something so out of the norm, a lot of the parents do have reservations about how dangerous it is, about the time that it is taking out from the rest of the things that you need to do. But I think I have learned just as much from the mountains as I have from my academics. So I think when children have a passion, it's the parents, if they nurture it, I'm sure the child is going to go ahead and climb their own Everest in whatever field they are interested in. But I think especially for young people, that support from the parents is very, very important. It can make or break the path that you take in that passion, I think.
So, at your age, with all that you've done, what is your understanding of leadership? Have there been moments when, you've had to take the lead, whether on an expedition or whether in any other place, etc.? Tell us a little bit about that.
I think at this juncture, I've probably not had as many leadership roles in a mountaineering expedition, but I think climbing with my dad, climbing with other people, I've seen the way they lead expeditions. And I think there's a lot that I've taken away from that. I think it has a lot to do about getting together with this new team of people. Every single expedition is a different team. They're from all around the world. There's different ideologies, there's different methods of climbing, and bringing together all these people, walking at the same exact pace because you're roped up with them. You walk as slow as the slowest person in your team. So everyone walks together, motivating your teammate when they're a bit tired. They support you when you're not on your best day. So I think it's a lot of lessons about working together with a team and working with new people. And I think also about taking very tough decisions, because every time there's been a challenge, there was one option of, maybe we should just play it safe and go back down. Or there was an option of we should take this call, which is maybe a bit risky, might be slightly dangerous, but we've weighed the pros and cons and we think this is the best possible solution, even though it may not seem like it at the moment. And I think to me, leadership in the mountains is also about taking those slightly difficult calls at times.
Absolutely.
When we were on Everest, the usual summit push starts in the evening or in the night, so you can summit by sunrise. But on the day that we were at the summit camp, there were extremely high winds. And after 1:30 in the morning, we were waiting up till then. But at that point, we said, there's no way we're going to go up after this and be back in time.
Yeah.
Two of our teammates had turned back. So we said, we have their oxygen stashed. Maybe we'll try and go up tomorrow night. And at 3:30, our expedition operator told us from the base camp that the winds were expected to die down and that we could try and start now for the summit push, which is something unheard of on Everest, to start out this late into the morning for a summit push.
Yeah.
And it was a very risky decision. We asked our lead Sherpa, have you ever started this late? And he said, in my 15 years of climbing Everest, I've never started this late. But it's going to work out and we're going to do it. And we made that call to go there. The expedition operator also informed the team leader, told us, I don't want you going tomorrow because there's 200 people coming up from Camp 3 to Camp 4. And if you go tomorrow, you're going to be stuck in line with them. And that turned out to be one of the most important calls, because the next day there was a lot of traffic on the summit push. And we were just about 40 or 50 people on the summit push on the day that we summited. So I think I also learned that taking those tough calls is important, but it's also important to weigh the pros and cons, because especially in mountaineering, you're putting your life at stake, or you're putting your safety at stake in a lot of places. So I think it's a lot of things that I've learned seeing the people around me lead teams and expeditions, which I think I'll definitely take forward in the future when I get to a point where I can lead teams myself.
You recently led a trek of young kids, so that would have been quite an experience, right?
Yeah, I led a trek to Harkidun in Uttarakhand, which was my second trek in the Himalayas ever, and one of my favorite treks of all time. And I was lucky enough to take a bunch of kids with their parents and their aunts along with me. And that was my first role of trek leader ever, so to say. And I think even though it wasn't a hardcore expedition, it was definitely much more difficult than being just a climber. I think it's a huge change where as a climber, you could be the second last person to come out of your tent with your backpack. But as a team leader, you need to be there 10 minutes before everyone else has woken up. So I think it's the small things that you don't notice when you're just there as a climber, which you start doing and start noticing. So I think there's a lot of takeaways that I'll maybe apply to the next trek that I lead and kind of grow from that.
Wonderful. We only have the best of wishes for you. And you make all of us and the country proud. So all the best for all your expeditions.